Hey, what's up? I'm Mike Squires, and this is Couch Riffs Podcast, episode number 162. And my guest, Bryan Ewald. Now, you're watching on YouTube, and you're a fan of guitars and music, so you probably know who Bryan Ewald is. Um, Bryan Ewald is, you know, around the world known as the guy who does all of the demo videos for Paul Reed Smith guitars. But he is a busy, talented session and touring guitar player. His regular bands are Starbelly and Jarflys, which are, he's from Maryland, like Paul Reed Smith is, and has played around the Annapolis and DC area for decades now. So he's got a killer little studio in his basement. And I met when I was at Paul Reed Smith Guitars. Nice guy. I think the first long conversation we had was at NAM at a dinner after one of the nights, and I was just like, "Yeah, I like this guy." And he turned me on to a great guitar store out there, and it's not in Maryland, where I don't know which state it is, but Atomic. So I had a great time catching up and hearing Brian's backstory and learning about all of his metal roots. But I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. If you are enjoying the Couches podcast or our cover song videos, please consider supporting us at Patreon. It's what makes this possible, for real. Thank you to everyone who is supporting already. I really, really, really appreciate you. Thank you. Um, because I don't mix the audio on my own. Like I couldn't make it sound that good. I don't have the gear or the ears. Anything that rhymes with ears, I don't have. Um, so that stuff gets paid for, and so your support directly supports that. So thank you. The other thing, thank you to River City Guitars in Spokane, Washington. Now, River City Guitars is a very cool little guitar store specializing in vintage, used, and just generally cool stuff. Um, Make sure to follow them at River City Guitars on social media. A lot of times things come in, and before it makes the website, it's gone. And it gets posted on social media. So go follow them on social media. Um, if you're looking to sell anything, you got something you're sitting on, get a hold of them, 509-818-7693, or shoot them an email, sales.rivercityguitars@gmail.com. My guy Bobby, I've known for years. I met him actually when I was a sales rep for PRS, and I met him through doing business, and we became good friends that way. And he's a great dude, and he'll treat you right. I wouldn't send you in the wrong direction. I promise. River City Guitars, thank you for your support. Don't forget the golden rule. You know the golden rule. Treat people the way you want to be treated. And just don't be a fucking asshole. Oh yeah, I see you.
What is up?
How you doing, bud?
Phones. Better.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Right. I'm going to move this up here so when I'm looking at the camera, or you, I'm looking kind of at the camera.
Or let me ask you something. Are you in a garage type edition, or are you in your basement?
Basement.
Yeah.
Basement.
That's a cozy basement, man.
I like it. We've been
Yeah.
in this house a while. Um, let's see, we moved in here. It'll be 20 years in August.
Oh wow. That's a lot of time to get your affairs in order.
Exactly. Yeah, this was when we moved in, it was a unfinished, it was the storage unit. We have no storage in our house, thanks to me.
Yeah, same
Yeah.
here.
But what did I just do? I just closed out the window. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? I found it. Okay. Yeah. Let me make sure I'm recording this here. Yeah. Um, yeah. So and it's changed a lot. I mean, I've moved it all around. I have made use of every.
Well, there's something on every square inch of the wall,
Oh, and you're
and
here. Wait, let me see if I can do this. I had to do
there's
something else. Uh,
a little bit of room to walk around, but
Not much. Yeah, actually, there is. It's here. Let me see if you can see this.
are you going to screen mirror or something?
Uh,
What is some kind of technology wizard?
I mean, a wizard is a strong. I'm more of a like a goblin.
Wizard's apprentice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's see if this works. Oh yeah.
Hey
Okay.
yo.
Yeah. Okay. Now look, I'll give you a little quick tour. So when I sit here, I've got my little cockpit of pedals,
Right.
but every like over here,
Wow.
I've squeezed guitars like there, and then that's my almost all my cases are over there. They're piled behind the drums, and then there I have
That's what I was going to ask you. I was going to, because that is a problem here. We
yeah
have like one closet in our whole house, right?
yeah
And unfortunately, it has to be used for,
closet
things
stuff,
that normal people use closets for.
right?
And so, I have there's cases, well, you can see them back here. There's cases back here. There's some over here to the left of me. There there are some in that closet. They're under every bed. It's just like,
I when I first built this, that area back there where the majority of the cases where you can see them, I built a shelf in the wall for the idea of like, and I had far fewer guitars at the time, so I was
sure,
oh, I can pile, and then where the cases are piled behind the drums is actually where the amps originally were. That was like my little amp nook under the guitars, and
right.
only one wall of guitars hanging. And
Yeah, of
I
course.
had some guitars put away in cases, and then the more I kept getting stuff like. I would get a guitar and they're like, "Well, I'm sorry, it only comes with a gig bag." I'm like, "Actually, that's better."
Yeah,
I
that's I was
like,
gonna ask you.
please.
I've gotten a few guitars over the last year, and I've just said, please do not send me a case
Yeah,
at all.
yeah, yeah. When people complain about, "Oh, I can't believe it doesn't come with a case," I'm like, that's actually a selling point for me.
Yeah.
But I have some cases in storage, and actually, if I walked you around the house, there's a lot. There's more
You
guitars.
have some that are stacked up, and that's the coffee table, and
Well, I've got in the closet by the front door, my primary gigging stuff is in there. And I have like a double gig bag that actually there's only one guitar in there. My primary gigging acoustic is upstairs. Um, I have just a spare random acoustic hanging in the living room. The Basically everybody in my house is playing now. My
right.
wife actually just started messing around, learning, and but up before
You
that,
just started learning.
yeah, she's always wanted to and dabbled, or like,
Yeah.
she's insanely musical, but she doesn't realize she is or doesn't believe. Hey, by the way, is this it, or we just?
Oh, we're talking, man. Yeah, we're going. We always go. It's always go time.
I didn't know if there was like some big intro. I was waiting for like
I intro separate. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, there's no fireworks or anything. Like it's happening, buddy.
the
So
internet is
careful what you say.
yeah. Face all that first stuff. Yeah, like um yeah. So yeah, she used to like pick up my guitar when we were first like dating, or she would just like figure out some melody part, just in a couple minutes,
Yeah.
and play it pretty well, and then put the guitar down and be like, I could never play a guitar. It took me forever. I'm like, A lot of people
Actually,
work really hard to do that, and it takes practice. But I don't know what happened recently. Just something clicked, and all of a sudden she was like, picking up the living room, and it was my oldest son was like showing her stuff. So I'd be down here working, I'd go up and the two of them are sitting on the couch with the guitars, and he's like, and this play this chord, and and
awesome.
she's pretty much stuck with it. I mean, she's been playing for a couple months now and learning songs, and
Oh, that's great.
gonna take my gigs pretty soon, probably.
Family band,
Yeah. Well, we already do that. We don't really gig out, but I
extended family band.
kids all the time. My kids are my go-to session drummers on any
Yeah,
project that I'm producing. They work cheap.
that's great. You can't get away with paying a minimum wage anymore. Like, here's $5.
Yeah. Hey,
They're not impressed.
experience.
They're not impressed. I gotta get, what is that, a B15 or a B12 behind you?
That's a B15.
Have you had experience with others like the B18? I've heard stay away from the 18.
I haven't honestly. I've played, I think, one of the B12s briefly a long time ago for just a minute, but no, I really haven't had much. And I mean, some of this stuff, like some of the vintage stuff, I've got a 67 deluxe reverb over here and that 68 super, this thing, um, a couple of the guitars. I've got this old Wurlitzer and stuff like that. I lucked into all that stuff back in the 90s when
Right,
nobody really gave a shit about it. And
right.
there's a place in like I don't have the kind of cash to like drop on that just to have something around, like, you
But
know.
you can actually, it's surprising you can get one of those B15s for like 12 to $1,500,
Oh
which
yeah, I don't. Yeah, yeah.
kind of surprises me for a vintage
Well,
or celebrated vintage recording amp.
I got it for $275.
Oh, that's a better price.
Yeah, yeah. And again, not that it's. I mean, it's totally worth the. But I'm mainly a guitar player,
Right.
and you were like, I'm mainly a bass player, and
Well,
and
check this out. I'll give you 350 for it, and then you'll be
I just
ahead.
paid $75. I'm,
Huh? You're
I'm
flush.
yeah, yeah. I've got a Dan Electro and like a 1960 Dan Electro baritone. It's like a six-string bass,
Yeah.
but like there's a place called Atomic Music in
That place is a gold mine.
amazing, and it's still great. They still get a lot of great stuff and bargains comparatively, but back in the day when the vintage thing was just kind of like it was taken off, but it wasn't. I would just go in there and see something, and I was such a geek of recording gear. Like I grew up with a cassette 4-track recorder
Right.
that I bought with, like, after I got my first OK amp. I used my paper route money to buy like a Tascam Porta Studio, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I spent all this time trying to like learn how to get sounds and all this stuff. So like I would go in there with I would buy rack gear, I would trade stuff. And fortunately I sold a couple things I wish I still had. At some point I had a 65 Princeton that I got for dirt cheap, and
Right.
I just really wasn't using it, or it didn't really get it. I was sticking a bunch of pedals in front of it, and years later I was like, I again I for what those things go for now, it's not worth it to me.
I
But
had one slip through my fingers too.
yeah, it wasn't mine, but my first gigging amp. So I actually just got my very first amplifier back. Not my first, but my first nice one. The first one I bought for myself. I had some little solid state practice amp.
You've been on a tear with this, going back and getting the oldies.
Well, some of it, the first one I found my old Kramer totally
Right.
by luck. That was like just watching Phil McKnight. I saw his like YouTube video. He's holding my childhood guitar up in his hands. I didn't realize it was mine at first, but there's a specific dent on it. But I was like, that looks just like my old guitar. I've been looking for one like that.
Oh,
And
that's who had it?
Yeah, he bought it. He bought it for like, he said, "Why did I buy this $300 Kramer um, instead of a Pete Thorne?" He wanted a Sir, like Pete Thorne Sir,
Right.
and it was like, "Hey, this is almost the same color. It's a Floyd Rose." He's like, I'm gonna like mod this into a poor man's Sir Pete Thorne model." And so that was the premise of the video. And when I saw it, I was like, I've been looking for that year Kramer in that color because it was like my childhood guitar that I traded away 30 plus years ago. And and he's like, "Oh," I said, "Look, if you ever want to sell it, let me know. I've been looking for that one." And just jokingly, I was like, "Oh, and is there doesn't happen to be some weird little dent in between the two pickups?" Like, and he sent me an up close picture of it. I was like, "That is my guitar." I was 100%. I don't need a serial number. That's my guitar.
That's
And
incredible.
he sold it to me for what he paid for it, and now it's, it's back in my loving arms.
That's a great story. What yeah, wow. I'm still hoping to find, I mean, it's not like I'm going to be able to buy it now. I had a 70s custom
Oh
that
yeah,
that a family member pawned and didn't get out of pawn when I
uh,
was gone.
yeah.
And who knows where it went. I went to the pawn shop, tried to talk with them, see if I could buy it. It was gone. I think they sold it to a vintage store. I went to the vintage store and they were like, I don't know what you're talking about, kid. Not 20,
That's,
like 21-year-old kid didn't.
you didn't have like the serial number or anything by any chance, did you?
No, but I would know it if I saw it, unless it was refinned, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, it had unreal amounts of wear, incredible belt buckle rash on the back. It was a horrible looking guitar. It was like cherry burst,
Did you
fucking,
do you have
you know,
clear pictures or any decent pictures of it?
oh, one with me and a crazy mullet holding it, like with a vest. Yeah, that's really good.
I would say you never know.
I'm
Like
still
one
looking. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I've totally lucked into that one. And I was kind of looking. I mean, I was looking. It's a rare color, and they only made that headstock in 1 year. So I was kind of like, I used to search for them here and there, but I wasn't like, I never really thought I'd find it. But
number one.
I don't know. You never know. Maybe the universe is going to put you back in touch with it at one point.
So this is a good segue because when did you have that guitar?
I bought that guitar new in like 85.
Did you say it was your first guitar?
No, so my first guitar I still have is this beat up acoustic, Harmony acoustic over there. I got that in
Uh-huh.
81. My mom bought it for me when I was 9. Now you know how old I am. Um, but and I had that, so I only had the acoustic for a couple years. My dad took me to like one of those. I don't even remember the name of it. It was in a little tiny mall, kind
Right.
of near me, and one of those strip mall kind of stores that mainly sold band instruments and no
Yeah, they
name.
rented horns and
Yeah,
yeah.
and you know, I was this. I had never touched an electric guitar in my life. I thought it was like just seeing one in person was like the coolest thing in the world. I was like,
Oh,
and so I
yeah.
was, and it was a Harmony SD Curly design, which SD Curly was some like 70s guitar builder that then licensed like body shapes out to like Hondo and they were all like natural mahogany.
Yeah.
Like they looked like cutting boards. They were perfectly flat, no contour, and they almost always had like a couple like lines of maple, like
Yeah,
like
yeah. They were like the post BC Rich
yeah.
and yeah.
And the neck joined the body at like somewhere around the seventh fret. Like it was the weirdest. Like and there was like this much body behind the bridge, and it was probably so uncomfortable. And I sold that to some kid in my neighborhood, and but the Kramer was the first guitar I bought for myself. I got a paper route, started saving my money. I was an Eddie Van Halen nut. It was the first year Kramer made the Focus. It was the first time there was a.
Oh yeah.
So I was like, I could actually afford that, like in the music store that I would hang out in all the time, and I put it on layaway. I don't remember how long it took. Like I'd probably go in there like with $19.38 every week for my paper route, and just here, put this on that guitar, and come back next week, and
Was it the hockey stick headstock?
no, it's this guy. It's the chicken beak.
Oh yeah.
And the word I've heard since, and I didn't
I mean,
know.
it looks kind of like the Pensa, right?
Well, I think what it was the story was they still had a bunch of necks that they made in New Jersey, and that after they ran out of those necks, they made the hockey stick headstock for all the focuses after that to differentiate them. But so the early that first year, the '84
Yeah.
Focus, uh, if it has this, supposedly the neck was made in Jersey.
Wow.
Surprisingly, it's actually like for an '80s guitar, I it was out of my possession for 30 years. I mean, I traded away in like '88, '89, something like that.
Do you
So,
remember what you traded it for?
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I remember the everything after that. So I traded it. There was a kid in my. He was a year older than me. I traded him. He had a Charvel Model 5 in what I called metallic eggplant. It was that
Mm-hmm.
like purplish, yeah, um, you know, with a Kaler,
Yeah.
active pickups.
Dip switches.
Yeah, and it was to me it was just different. So I was like, this wasn't sentimental to me at the time. It was just like it was just a guitar, and I'd had it for a couple of years, and it was like, yeah, it was cool, but this was a nicer, more expensive guitar, and he loved mine. And we were at a party or something. He's like, "Man, I'll trade you straight up." I was like, "Done." And then that one, I had that for a while, but then I got a job at a music store teaching in my sophomore year, and or no, my junior year, and it was that same store that I bought that guitar from, and now I was making decent money,
You're
and
teaching in the strip mall.
no, where I got the Kramer from.
Gotcha.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it was actually a cool little store in Annapolis. It was they had two locations that I started teaching in both. Like I had just started driving. Like all my friends were, if anything, they were like bussing tables somewhere. And
Right.
I'm thinking I'm making. I don't even know. They were probably underpaying me because they saw me as like a kid they could hire, and
Sure.
But I was like, you're gonna pay me to do something with guitar? Like I had no idea what I was doing teaching, no business teaching. I had to figure out it as I went, but I probably spent half my paychecks
At the
on.
store, right?
Yeah, yeah. I was, I bought a. I went after I got rid of that. I went through an Ibanez phase because I was like super into like uh, Satriani and Steve Vai. So I
Paul
think
Gilbert.
I had a yellow Ibanez Saber,
Oh yeah.
and then I for a hot minute I had a, a prototype of the 7 string Universe, and it was
You
like
had a 7 string.
it was yeah it was
I'm trying to imagine you as this like proto metal shredder, and I'm having a hard time.
I was oh man, as a kid it was I was into guitar, just guitar, and it had
Yeah.
to be. I liked it to be fancy and fast, and and I mean I was a song guy because I mean Eddie Van Halen, even though he was I mean deep down songs were in my heart, but I didn't. I
Right.
was too guitar focused. But my first paying gig, uh, I was still in high school, and I got a phone call, and it was somebody who had met me through the guitar store I was teaching, and didn't really know me that well, but like unbeknownst to me, he gave my name to this band that was doing. I mean, they were touring the East Coast. They were a reggae band called Mama Jama. They were playing these big festivals, and their guitar player was from like West Africa, and but he was like I think stuck out of the country, or there was some issue where he couldn't get back, and they had like 2 gigs over the weekend, and I had a couple days notice. I got a phone call. They're like, "Hey, do you want to come do this gig? Like it pay?" And I was like, the money was great, and I was like, "Yeah." And I bring my Ibanez 7 string to a reggae gig. They're like, "Oh my god, who did we just hire?" I was so nervous that all I did was I did exactly what I was supposed to do because I wasn't.
Right.
If I was
But you didn't get loose at
I was
all.
feeling cocky, I probably would have overplayed the gig. But I was like, but I had so much fun, and that like led to a lot. I started playing through that music store teaching gig because everybody else working there was 15 years or 20 years older than me,
Right.
and they were all established in town playing in bands. So like I was the young kid who wasn't jaded, and it wasn't like, hey, do you want to, we got this gig this weekend. Do you want to do it? And I wasn't like, what does it pay? I was like, yeah, like, and
Right. What else are you gonna do?
yeah.
Like,
So, I mean, I started playing around town with the generation that was kind of before me and got my foot in the door that way. And
what a great way to get your feet wet too.
that was great.
Like there's so much education in that. There's a playing with people who have years and years and years of performance experience and like, soaking that in.
Yeah.
And then also just the experience of like learning from them, like watching them behave at a gig,
Oh, yeah. I mean,
habits.
it was the best school I could have done. Like it really was. And I always feel bad. Like I've had, young people come ask me over the years, whether they're especially in this town, they're like, hey, really trying to get my foot in the door and get out there and like how how'd you get your start? And I was like, I a lot of it was just kind of luck, right place, right time, or so.
Right.
And but
Well, did you chase the store down to teach there, or did they offer you? You were like in there,
I
like fingering the guitars one day.
I was that stereotypical kid that if I could get a ride to the music store on a Saturday or whenever, I would just go there and noodle on the guitars. And I mean, I was an early adapter. Like I started playing young, and I just played all the time. So I could figure out tunes fine, and I did take a couple lessons there when I was and so I got to know the people working there, and I had a teacher for a short bit that was trying to teach me some theory, and I was just not in the mental place to even give a shit about it. And he would go, come back next week and do the, be able to answer these questions, and then I'll help you with that little section of the song you can't figure out. Because I was like, just help me with the parts of the songs I can't get.
Right.
And
Because there, of course, for any, if there are young people, I see my optics.
yeah, yeah.
For young,
There was no internet. There was no
there's
YouTube.
no internet to find a lesson. Maybe there was a tab in a guitar for the practicing musician.
And even those, I realized those were somebody's interpretation of it.
Of course.
So it's like there were definitely times where I was like, this doesn't sound exactly right to me always. And sometimes it was my own fault. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
and I know I learned things improperly, and I'd go back years later and be like, oh shit, I thought I knew this song, but as your ears hone in. But I, no, I was just that kid that hung out there all the time, and they had a teacher leave, and they were like, hey, you can figure out songs. And in the music store, that's mostly what it was. You were
Right.
helping some kid with what year that would have been. That would have been, I mean, it was like, hey, can you show this kid talk dirty to me? I was like, yeah, I can figure that out,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I mean, and every once in a while you would get somebody who'd come in who's like, um, I
Show
want
me this.
to learn how to play fingerstyle like, Paul Simon. And I was like, I don't know how to do that at all. So I'd go home and try to figure out what I could. And, fake it till you make it kind of thing. And it was the best thing that I could have started teaching was the best thing I ever did because I worked so much harder to because I had to because I was like put under the gun that than I would have. I'm not that driven as a I'm not I have some friends who were like a good guy, a good friend I know who's an amazing player. He's the kind of guy who would lock himself in the room and practice 10 hours a day, like technique stuff. And he's a monster. And I realized a long time ago that that's not me. I don't have that kind of drive to like put that kind of work into a technique. It's just
Right.
and every time I would sit down to play and I would try to like force myself to practice something, my brain would start wandering and I'd just start improving or, it just
That's
ate.
why I can't pick sweep.
No.
I can't do that.
And you know what? You'll never lose a gig because you can't do that.
Well,
Well, it depends on in my world, that's
well, I
never.
mean, yeah. Ingve's not calling anyone for a second guitarist gig, so yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah. I, you know,
Um,
I I will say that what happened for me though was like I joined a band. My first band was not a guitar. Like I don't mean like jamming with friends in high school kind of thing, but like when I first got a working band that called me, um, my friend was playing bass, and it was somebody again. I met almost everybody through the music store. That was kind of like and he was a guy who worked at one of the stores, and he was a guitar player first, but he started playing bass because they needed it in this band, and
yeah.
then he called me because they weren't happy with the guitar player, and and I was like, yeah, man, it's like the guys seemed like fun and there was money in it, and I didn't have a guitar amp anymore. I traded my only guitar amp I owned for some guitar because I
So
was
you
getting
had
ready to
no
make.
amp.
Well, I mean, I might have had something small. I don't know. I don't think I really. I mean,
Yeah,
back
you
then this
didn't
was.
gig with a combo back then, unless it was a twin or something. AC
Oh no. Well, I
twin.
mean, this was. I just. I mean, I think I had a Mesa Boogie Studio 22
Oh yeah.
is what it was, and I traded my first amp for that, or traded it and went and bought that, and then I actually this was the one year I worked at PRS. I graduated high school and I worked at PRS in
What were
nine
you doing there?
sanding and then buffing.
That's the first gig everyone gets, right? Sanding.
Yeah, or whatever. It's somewhere. I mean, you're labor. Yeah, you're doing something, and it was cool. That's how I met Paul. That's how I met a lot of the people that I got to know through there. But it was just the local guitar factory. I mean,
Right.
they were doing fine, but it was in a small little shop in Annapolis still, and I was working there when I got the call for this gig, and there was a guy there who had some PRS like project guitar that and he liked my amp and we traded, and then I got this call to join this band and I was like, okay, but full disclosure, I don't have an amp. you know it's like, hey, we should deliver pizzas. Hey, that's cool, I'd love to. I don't have a car, by the way.
Right.
So
What'd you do about that?
well, so my friend who called me who um, was primary guitar player had a couple amps, and he's
Oh
like, "Well,
yeah.
you can use one of mine until you can get some." And so I was using a Fender Bassman clone that he had that was a made by THD. It was killer.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was
Cool.
I used that for a little bit, but then I don't know how long it was, maybe 6 months. I
Yeah.
used another amp that he had just ordered, and which it still seems a little crazy. He ordered it in '91. He paid $6,500 for it in
Wow.
1991.
Oh, wait a minute.
It was a Howard Dumble overdrive special,
Wow.
100-watt head. He was a huge Robin Ford nut, and he worked in a place in Baltimore called Guitar Exchange,
Right.
and a customer had come in and heard about Howard, or Alexander, I guess his real name is, but and had ordered this amp through my buddy Joe through the store, um, and Joe was like, oh, this is the guy who makes Robin Ford's amps, and it was his hero. And Joe had the money, and he was like, it took him a year to get it, but he was like, whatever you did for Robin, build me that, like, just make another one of that. And so I was playing like Scandals in Ocean City and the Gingerbread Man Ladies Night in Severna Park, Maryland, with a 100-watt tumble, with a with
That's
a pedal
fucking
board. Like,
amazing.
and I wasn't even using it in the capacity that it was designed to be. I was just like a clean amp pedal platform. I had no idea.
Or that's what you called it.
Well, it sounded great. It sounded awesome, but it was kind of like the tones that I had in my head at the time were so different that like I didn't really get it to the point. I loved it, but it wasn't like I still couldn't go like, how could he have paid that? Like that was so much money to me. I couldn't imagine. And basically told him I got something else, but I really didn't like playing it because it was so valuable that like it would be in the trailer of like a U-Haul trailer on the back of our singer's Jeep parked in Ocean City, Maryland after the gig while we slept in the hotel. I'm going, how many times do those trailers get yanked?
Yeah,
It's
that's
so easy. Like, and even if you got insurance money, it would take you another year to get this amp. And he
not
sold it.
anymore. Now it takes a lot longer.
Oh yeah, well he wouldn't be able to get it now if he wanted. I mean, he sold it a couple years later, and I know he made money on it. Not he regrets, you know, he had no idea what it was going to end up being worth.
What do they
But
sell for now? 100 grand?
oh yeah, and that one was kind of like the holy grail. Well, that and a like a steel string singer. Like if you
Right.
either have like the Stevie Ray Vaughan one or the Robin Ford, like um, and the uh, Dave Barber Electronics.
Yeah.
I was kind of his guinea pig when he was first building pedals. He was a studio owner in Baltimore, and I was doing sessions at his place all the time when he built his first pedal. And he was good friends with Joe also. And Dave had the Dumble at his house after I stopped using it. And I think around the time Joe decided he was going to sell it. So the Dumble was at Dave's shop, and Dave based that. He built a pedal called the Burn Unit, which was like one of his second overdrive pedal. He built the tone pump was his first one, and then the Burn Unit was based on that Dumble. And long before like anybody, I don't think anybody had a Dumble style pedal out before that.
Right.
The hype hadn't really even gotten there yet.
Let me take a quick sidestep.
Yeah.
Is the John Mayer amp uh more or less a Dumble like amp?
Yeah. Oh, I left it on here. Yes, sort of.
Got one sitting there, and
So I mean, I know if I don't know how many like massive guitar geeks are gonna watch this and flame me for this, but this is my take on the whole Dumble thing. So there isn't a dumb. It's like saying like, oh,
right.
it's a Fender sound. Like, I mean, are you talking about a
Well,
Tweed amp or a Brown Pro or a Blackface Deluxe or a
what's
like
funny because when people say Fender sound to me, I always think about a twin. I just think about a clean,
right?
massive overhead sound.
Well,
I
so
don't think about a
you have a particular Fender sound in your mind, which
right.
is, but the thing is, in general, when you say I want a Fender amp sound, that'll mean kind of different things to different people. But really, they've made a ton of different amps that sound remarkably different from one another.
Right.
And generally, if you're going to categorize it, most people will think of like a Blackface Deluxe or a Twin, kind of like those are probably the two most ubiquitous like Fender sounds, right? Dumble was an amp mod guy. Like he would take Fender amps and just kind of tweak them. And then when he started building his own thing, they were based on like, he would take like a Tweed Twin or he would take a certain thing and then he had some of his own. Like one thing that is similar in the J mod to a Dumble is that he put the overdrive circuit after the preamp instead of before the preamp. So like on a lot of his amps, like the overdrive special, he'd have a solid state sometimes MOSFET gain circuit in those. But either way, a lot of times the drive section came after the preamp and the tone stack. So it's almost like putting an overdrive pedal in an effects loop. So
Right.
instead, but so that is one similarity. It's not a Dumble clone at all, but it definitely was. It was an amp that Paul built, very much inspired by a Dumble that he had, and then, but it's not a straight up clone. And
Right.
I think what he did was like Mayer was in working on a guitar with him, and Paul was like, "Check this amp out." And John loved it. But from the time that Paul showed him what he had built to the time it came out, they had tweaked it.
As always,
Yeah. So,
that
uh,
that guy is a world class tweaker, not
yeah,
in the drug sense, but yeah,
yeah.
you
What?
can't visit the factory without him like blazing through the hallways, like holding something up over his head.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you should have seen Paul. So Paul doesn't know, or he didn't know at the time, even though it was when I was working at his factory and I left because of this band that I was in when I was playing that Dumble. But he never saw my band back then. Like,
Right.
but when he brought me in when this amp was coming out and I had to do some like demos and clinics, he was like, he never does this. Like he doesn't come in and tell me specifically what he wants me to do. Um, but he was like, I want you to come in. I want to show you something about this amp, and I want to explain kind of like the whole Dumble circuit idea and how, and a lot of it was the where the drive circuit was, and he just put me in a room and cranked it up and let me play with it for a little bit, and I was like, it actually really does remind me of of a Dumble. Like there's a like of it was kind of the weight of the note, like on the high strings, like you play it and it sounds, instead of like a thin treble string, it's got this girth to it, and it sounds huge, but it never sounds like, even though it's 100 watts, this amp is not like overbearingly loud ever. Um, and when the main thing is that when you play clean, it feels like there's gain on it. It like sings and sustains, and
Yeah.
without any compression, without anything, like you can play these giant clean solos that just react as if the amp is overdriven. And then when you put overdrive in it, it it's amazing too. But and I said it kind of reminds me of like a Dumble. And he's like, "Have you played a Dumble?" I was like, "Actually, Paul, when I was a kid and I quit working at your factory, that was my gigging amp." And I don't think he believed me at first when I told him the story. And he's met my friend Joe, but I mean, it was, uh, yeah, he had no idea. And
Yeah.
honestly, it's still kind of, I wish I could go back in time and play that again, because like with my ears now, because
Right.
I remember it being great, but
Well, you were only a couple of years away from the Ibanez at that point, right?
oh, this is post Ibanez.
Right, but you were only a couple of years away from that at that point.
Oh yeah. No, I had no bearing of understanding of, yeah.
You had hearts in your eyes over a X100B probably 9 months earlier.
Before I had my first amp that had distortion in it, I had I had a little solid state 10-watt amp that had three knobs on it. If you turned all the knobs all the way up, it would not break up in the
Right.
least. And I wanted to sound like Van Halen,
Yeah.
and I had no pedals. I had no reverb, no distortion, nothing.
And that's for kids who are listening. There were no modeling amps back then.
Mm.
There actually Peavey made an amp that had phaser built into it.
Well, the Roland made the jazz chorus.
Right. And that had chorus built in. Later on, Crate had some amps that had, that sort of like copped that vibe with reverb and chorus.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, this was
Uh,
like the most basic.
Getting overdrive was the best it got with amps,
So
and they
my first two overdrive before I actually got an overdrive pedal, which this was still in the I was probably I don't know 12 maybe. Um and uh I could get distortion at home because I had a tape deck, which I still actually have sitting over there. I had a tape deck that had quarter-inch microphone inputs, and if
yeah,
you plug directly in and turn the recording level all the way up, and it just pegged the little view meters dimed, it sounded, the guitar solo in Easy like a Sunday morning.
yeah,
Bzz, you
just
know,
so buzzy and
it was
nasty.
that's what but it was distortion, so I was like,
Right.
I love it, and but of course I couldn't get that sound anywhere but sitting in my bedroom. So if I would go to I put my guitar and my amp in my Radio Flyer wagon and
Right.
walk all the way across the golf course that I lived next to because I knew this kid on the other side of the golf course with a drum set. And of course, I couldn't get that sound. And one of my sister was older, and she had some friends that were musicians. One of her friends gave me a broken guitar tuner, like the Quartz guitar tuner, and the brand was Banana.
Right.
Banana Quartz guitar tuner, and it wouldn't work, but it had like an in and a through, and somebody was like, "Hey, this thing's broken, but if you can try to fix it." But whatever was going on with it, if you plugged in and went through the through out,
It distorted.
it sounded like a bad cable disorder, like a torn speaker. It was like it just got a free distortion pedal. So that's where I set my bar. That's how
Right.
low my bar was set. And then I went from that to playing a
Good
drum.
Dumble.
You could plug me into anything that sounded good, like that had a neat sound to it. I'd be like, yeah. So
That's
much more
incredible.
refined now. My tastes have become, very.
Clearly. Yeah, clearly. So,
I still love shitty guitar tones.
well, I mean, some of the most classic guitar sounds are not like when you listen to classic recordings, some of the guitar sounds aren't awesome. And if you're lucky enough to get your hands on isolated stems, they're kind of downright nasty. Like they are not what you're sort of spoon fed on YouTube as like, listen to this tone. Like there's such thing as an amazing sound when a guitar player is just playing on their own. And then there is the sound that works and gels perfectly in a recording. Sometimes those are
Live,
completely different
a
things.
recording or in a band. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And really, what it is it's a vibe and a part. Like the part makes
Right.
the sound cool. You
And
know,
the performance.
yeah, you could go back and look at any guitar tone that is, revered.
Right.
There's a song or a player that it's attached to.
Right. And
And the thing is, if that song had been a different guitar tone, it would be that tone that people like. And it's the same thing with players. Like it's songs that everybody connects to. Like
right.
all of the guitar players that make the top 50 greatest guitar players ever, there's kids on YouTube that have facility that, could play circles around the majority of them. But, and obviously, I mean, that doesn't make somebody a better guitar player because you have
Right.
more technique. But, um, but it really is all about the song. And like, I mean, Gilmore is a perfect example.
Right.
One of my favorite guitar players. If you didn't have those songs that he played on as reference, if he was just some dude who lived in your town,
Playing
playing
fucking
guitar,
smooth blues
he'd be
licks.
really good. People would be like, yeah. But it's like, but what he created and the parts that he created, it doesn't matter if he played into a pig nose or played into whatever. And people go nuts trying to buy the exact same things that all their heroes had because that's their way of trying to achieve this vibe that they have when they're chasing this thing. where, you know, Jeff Beck could plug into anything,
Right.
and what would come out would be like, stick a mic on it, let's record it. That's great. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and it's I geek out over gear and I chase tones too, but like I also realize that like I made my living off of one Mexican made Fender Strat. I had one amp, one guitar, and a tube screamer for a good chunk of my time.
Right.
And I listened back to recordings that were made back then. I was like, man, it sounded really good. I liked it. You don't need all this. And this is just,
But it's nice to have.
it's me living out my dream of when I was a kid and I'd open up. Did you ever used to do this? Would you flip through a guitar magazine?
Well, that's all you had. You couldn't get on and go through Sweetwater or Reverb or whatever, right?
Right. No, but if I was flipping through a guitar magazine, I used to play this game in my head that like if I could like I Dream of Jeannie and make any of these guitars in the magazine appear in my house, like I had to narrow it down to like I can pick 10 guitars from this magazine. And I would go through and I would like go paint. I was like, okay, I think I want this one and that one. And then I would find like I just couldn't decide. So I'm like, okay, 15 guitars out of this magazine I'm gonna pick that yeah.
Can you remember guitars that you fantasized about having that you still never owned from the 80s?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, my tastes obviously have changed, but I mean, when I was a kid, it was all about shapes and like it would be like, "Oh, I don't have one in that shape. That's pretty crazy." And I was not like I didn't geek out over Strats and Les Pauls and stuff when I was young,
Right.
because I came from the Eddie school, and then I got into Stevie Ray Vaughan and Eric Johnson. They kind of got me into and I had a Strat for well, I got the Mexican Strat once I fell in love, but my first Strat was when I was working in that music store. Another guitar that I just recently got back, if you can imagine that. I
That's
got it's this one. Oh, and I promise this is the end of the guitars that I got back. So this is an 85, 84, 85
It didn't
Strat.
come stock with the Kaler.
No, but it was a top mounted trem, much like it was a Fender version of a Kaler, and somebody put
Really?
a real Kaler on this one. But this was an 84 or 85, I can't Strat Elite,
Oh yeah.
which has active pickups, the three little push buttons, and
Right.
this is like a if I
A
it's
blend, a pickup blend.
no, but it's an active control. Like all the way off is like a scooped mids, and then it pushes the mids, and this is like a bass control. I mean, it's not what you expect. If you have
Right.
all the knobs all the way up, it sounds really weird. But then
Right.
oh yeah, but this was because I was
Like for the studio guy.
yeah. Well, this was the 80s. Fender was
Right.
like nobody wants vintage guitars right now. And everybody's modding their Strats. So let's build something that's modern. And it's got like a crazy flat radius
Huh.
and a really
Going after
small,
that Ibanez thing.
yeah, exactly. And they only made this for a year or two, but then I think these pickups are what became it's kind of I think Clapton put out a signature or something.
Right.
It ended up being similar, but this one, the reason I fell in love with it was I was super into King's X,
Oh yeah.
and this is what Ty Tabor played, and I had never seen one, and I was coming out of a lesson at the music store, and it was hanging on the wall. Somebody had just traded it in, and I was like, and whatever I had at the time, I probably traded in and got
Right.
this. But
How long did you work at that music store?
that one in particular, uh, honestly, let's see. I started there in maybe like 89, 88 or 89.
Go into the 90s.
and I worked there probably. So I started at PRS in '92. I had graduated high school, so a couple, and then I kind of started teaching. So probably for like 3 or 4 years, and
Hmm.
then I taught at another music store in Annapolis. I left PRS to join this band, and that
Right.
band was my livelihood for the most part. But I was, broke and hungry still because we were gigging, but uh, and and then I started teaching again because we put out a record and we tried to switch from being a cover band that was making okay money to an original band, and the money basically completely stopped coming in. And,
Well, wait a minute. What are you trying to say?
yeah,
It's hard to make a living as an original touring and performing act?
well, I mean, I think we were playing the wrong rooms. It was really, but uh, but so I started teaching again full time, and I think I kind of burned myself out at that in that point of teaching. Like um, I was teaching for another music store, and it was all right, and that was probably '94 to '96, and it was right before I kind of had this other. I joined all these new bands around town. Some were an original band, and then I started picking up tons of gigs. But in that interim, I got a restaurant job for a hot minute because I was just like, um, I was like, I loved teaching, but I was doing it so much at the time. And the music store thing, I didn't want to just sit there and figure out songs for kids. Like I was like, I
Right.
want to and you can't do anything in a half-hour lesson really
Yeah.
instructive. So, but yeah, those mid '90s, the early mid '90s were. I mean, I was just whatever came along, I'd be like, okay, I'll try it. Okay, um, and then the mid '90s,
So
we
how
were.
many at the peak of it, how many bands were you playing with in the 90s?
I don't know. I mean, I always had multiple bands of my own. I'd have like a primary, but so Annapolis was like, and even the generation before me, it's not much like that now. But there was a point in time where like downtown Annapolis, there would be one or two places that were like the place to be every night of the week, and it was a small enough town. Like you go to Baltimore or DC or Philly,
Right.
you can't walk the whole city.
Right.
There's little neighborhoods and cool spots. Annapolis is walkable, the whole
Right.
thing.
The whole town is like Pioneer Square in Seattle.
Right. But there's a huge concentration of like really talented people in the Baltimore, Annapolis, DC area because there's so much work.
Right.
It's not oversaturated because you don't have people moving in from all over the country to make it in the music industry here. There's not a music industry here. But you
It's not
also,
still like that though, is it? I mean, I've been there there's still that many venues.
I mean, not just venues. Yeah, there's work. I mean, I know so many people around here who make a living playing music,
That's
whether
great.
it's just bar gigs. But I don't know, for at least 10 years, I was gigging 7 nights a week. And I had residency gigs Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday
Right.
with different bands. So, like Sunday night, I was playing in a trio downtown Annapolis doing whatever we want, mostly covers, but just like kind of anything goes. Monday nights, I was playing. Well, I mean, and once one gig went away, another one came up, but like, um, and so in a given week, I'd be playing with 5 different bands, and most of them were bands that I was a member of, and then there was the hired gun stuff, which, but I mean,
And these are gigs that you slot into and probably don't rehearse, right? If they're
uh,
cover gigs.
I've done. I could probably count the number of rehearsals I've done in my life, and and I don't mean I wish there was more time to do it. I mean, there's a couple situations, a couple people I played with that like, okay, we would rehearse here and there, but like the majority of my bands like have never have rarely play outside of like
Club.
work.
Right,
Um,
because there's like a repertoire of songs, and if there's a new song that's being introduced, you'd be like, "All right, we're going to do this one,
but I learned this.
but in the key of instead of whatever." Right?
Yeah, and but I mean, but even in original bands, like I mean, it's like it's because I've always kind of been in this higher gun role, so a lot of times it's like, oh, okay, the band knows this, and then I'm coming in, so it's like I have to sit home and learn everything,
Right.
and I go play. Um, but after I kind of got out of the bar, I mean, I haven't actually ever totally gotten out of the bar gig world. Every once in a while, I still do stuff, or I do solo acoustic gigs when I'm home, but in the I was traveling a bit in the 90s, late 90s, doing a few different things, but it was mostly my bands. And then I was doing a little bit of hired gun work. And then in the, like, right, my primary original band that I was in the 90s kind of split up. Uh, Not a big breakup, but we just kind of decided, okay, we can't all agree on what's going on. And we put out a couple records and just independently. And then right then I met the the, the guys that are in one of my primary bands now, Starbelly, and I joined them in like '99, and it was stylistically completely different than what I had been doing before. But at the same time, I got a call to play on a record with this guy Jimmy Davies, also known as Jimmy Haha, who's the lead singer and songwriter of Jimmy's Chicken Shack.
Right.
It was kind of like he was a huge deal in town because he was there was a local band that had
Record deal.
Island Records and on MTV, and it was like, um, and so I was like, yeah, I was playing on people's records for them, but that's what it was. I was just being hired gun on the record. That record had to be shelved for about a year and a half because he was still under contract with Island, and they were sitting on him, and if they knew that that record was recorded under their thing, they would technically own it. So like we put it out, and this was the early days of like not chat rooms, but like message boards.
Right.
So our band had a message board, but we didn't have a record out. And we were basically only playing a couple little gigs in Annapolis. We had a Tuesday night residency at a place, and it was packed. It was a great, and because it was Jimmy, it was like, oh,
Right.
he got a new project. Let's go see what he's doing. And it basically turned into a band before the record came out. It went from being like Jimmy's doing a solo record, then it became, and that band is still technically together. So, and those are my two primary original projects that I'm a member of.
Right.
But I made a list a couple years back of like the my bands that I've been a part of, from bar bands to whatever, to original bands to anything, and then like bands that I've been hired by, not like jammed with, but like bands or artists that have like I've either played on a recording, played a tour, and or just like it could be one show because I've done a
Sure.
lot of and I'm sure I forgot some, but I got to about 160.
Wow.
So and I've been doing it a long time,
Right.
and I'll whore myself out to anybody. So I mean that just, you know. Um,
Let me ask you this. When and how did it come back around that you started, because you're sort of like the face outside of Paul. When I think of seeing a demo, I have grown to just expect I'm going to see you demo any new gear from them,
yeah. So
from from
yeah,
PRS, for people who are listening.
sure. So I uh, I remained friends with a lot of the people down there, and but I was mainly playing Fenders, like all
Yeah,
through the '90s, early 2000s. And it's not that I didn't. I mean, PRS was my home brand, but I was a single coil guy. Like really, even when I got like
also it was a lot of bread for a guy who was making his
oh yeah
living
yeah yeah
doing club gigs.
absolutely, and but really it kind of came down and um but one of my later original bands, not like one of the ones I was in the late '90s. Paul really Paul would come see us or come see me and the singer in that band. We did a duo, and um, he would hire us to play his company Christmas party, like in
Oh,
the early 2000s, mid 2000s, like, and I'd show up with a telly, because that's what I had, that's what I played.
right.
But and then it was around that time. It was sometime in the like
Did he? How
2000s.
much ball bust did he bust your balls about it?
Oh no.
Never.
There was one time his band was playing downtown Annapolis and so was mine. And I come walking out of my venue and he's walking by, and I was playing a Mexican Strat at the time. That was my only main guitar, right? And um I've got it in the gig bag. He's like, "Hey, you still have that? You still playing that blue Strat?" I was like, "Yeah." And of course I'm like, "What are you playing these days?" Like,
Yeah.
you know. And I meant which PRS, but he
Yeah.
took it as like, I'm playing my own guitars. I'm like, yeah, I think at the time he was like bringing a dragon around everywhere, like he's, in a gig bag. But Paul didn't really care. Like he
Yeah.
understood, and it was like he also knew that like I was, and I have to say, like honestly, PRS up until like 2007, 2008, they played great. They're beautiful, but sonically, a lot changed.
Right.
Like the pickups were really like high output. I mean, if you played high gain, I mean, think of all the players in the late '90s, early 2000s. It was like a custom 24 into a triple rec was the sound. That was cool. I liked it, but that was never something I was going for.
Right.
I like twang and chime and jangle and like and the quirkiness of single coils. And I was a low to
Pickups
medium
is
guy.
not the thing now.
No, but it never was for me. I
Right.
mean, other than the early days when I could give a shit about, like, as long as it made, when it was
Back when you were plugging into the tape deck.
I'm in a saber into a tape deck, like whatever. But the you know I started as an artist with them around then because I was playing a lot still locally, but I started traveling a bunch with different acts, a couple label acts, and as a hired gun. But I was working a lot, and uh, a friend of mine at PRS, who would come see the Jarflys, which is the band with Jimmy, and Jimmy was a PRS guy, and they would bring, you know, the hollow bodies would get, like, in the very first couple years would get a crack between the toggle switch and the F hole. Like there's this little bit of maple that when they would get shipped, if there was too much pressure on the top, and so they had to like start unscrewing the toggle switch before they could, like, they had to reconfigure the case. So a couple guitars, maybe, I don't know, a dozen guitars came back, and they would go to art. They'd repair them, but they're not going to sell that guitar as a B
Right.
stock. So I would go to an artist, and they would go to Jimmy and like, hey, we got an arch top or a hollow body with a crack in the top. We'll sell it to you at like dirt cheap, cost of parts. And at one time I was like, how many of those do you have, Jimmy? Like, come on, hook a brother up. I'll
Right.
buy one. Like, like, and Jim Cullen was like, so you'd want, would you play one? I was like, yeah, like, sure, like, absolutely. Like, I love gear. I love guitars.
So your first PRS was an arch top?
Well, no, back in the day, back when
They
I
were,
worked there, I had a couple of the early EGs.
oh,
Remember
yeah,
the old EGs that were kind of
the first
stratty?
bolt-ons.
Yeah, and the one that I had that I loved was stolen from my car. Like back in the '90s, I was on my way to a gig and the car was broken into. They stole that, um, and my bowling ball. Um, but but it was,
Wow.
yeah. I don't even know why I had a bowling ball in there. I was going through a phase. Um, but
A
the
phase of fun.
yeah, yeah. Um, and they I was ready to buy that guitar at, like I was like, whatever it costs, like, because I knew it'd be a deal, but like it was going to be a good enough deal that, like, and Jim Cullen on my behalf, like, went to artist relations and was like, this is a hometown guy.
Yeah.
He's gigging all the time. And now he's doing a bunch of tours. He's playing overseas. He's
Yeah.
playing, and of course, I'm no huge. I'm not going to sell a billion guitars for him, as But I'm like, but he was like, he should be playing a PRS, and so that kind of, I never in a million years would have had the gall to like go ask for any kind of endorsement.
What
Like
was Jim's role then?
he was like national sales. No, no, I
He
mean
was already.
he was no, he was in sales, but he wasn't like the head. Like he had a, I didn't know. Like honestly, like I knew everybody who worked in there, but if you asked me what their exact role was, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, so I never went through the artist relations route. Like,
Right.
like Jim basically was my contact, and he would like, and this was the SEs were pretty new,
Mm-hmm.
and they got me that hollow body, and it was like, oh, this thing's awesome. And I was like, man, I really could use a P90 guitar, and those SEs are slamming. Like, so I went to him. I was like, hey, man, could I buy one of these? And like they just hooked me up with a couple guitars, and like they gave me a couple at first, and then this gold top that I have around here somewhere that like I bought at an artist deal, but I didn't. There was nothing ever written out like here's your artist deal, and um and I was playing them, but not exclusively.
Right.
And this was before any of the demos. Uh, and then I was on this
There
tour.
was no such thing as a demo at that point, right?
No, they were doing them. It was they had a guy, Jay Hayes, was doing them.
Oh, yeah, I
But
remember. Okay.
but it wasn't. I don't think that wasn't his only role there. I think he was like a rep, and he lived in St. Louis or something. He lived out of
Yeah.
state, and he did something else with the company, and they would bring him in to do demos when they needed one, and he's great player. And
Okay.
I don't know exactly, like, I honestly, I don't know the inner workings of like it, but it all happened super organically. Like I was touring, and I'd started touring a lot more at this point because I I stepped back from it when my kids were born, and I really like, go away for a weekend, 4-day thing was one thing, but I was like, I don't want to be on the road, And
Sure.
then as they were getting a little bit older, I got a couple opportunities to do a couple long runs, like 2.5, 3 month kind of runs, and I didn't do a lot of them. I might do one or two a year tops, but really one long one. And I was out doing this. I was out with this girl Rachel Yamagata, and I brought a Telly, a Jazzmaster, and a Les Paul. And I was playing the Telly mostly, and I used the Les Paul for like one song. And I needed the Jazzmaster. I needed the vibrato, and the Starla had been out for a little bit, but it was I had never messed around with one, and I had talked to Jim. I was like, man, I'd love to just check one out, and I think I could bring the Telly and the Starla and leave the Jazzmaster and the Les Paul at home because I think it would suit what I need for both. And the tour had just started, but we were in the Northeast, and we came through town before we finished up and went out west. So I was like, I'm going to be coming home in a week. Is there one that I could borrow? And I picked one up, and that became my main guitar for like 2.5 years.
And
Like,
that's before the S2.
yes, yeah.
That's when it was like a, yeah.
Yeah, the S2 wasn't a thing yet. And
Right.
they were trying to figure out how to make some guitars in the US cheaper. And that, like, the Mira and the Starla were the start of that. And then but that was the first one. I mean, the hollow body's great, but that was never really my main kind of guitar anyway. But this was like the first time I played one that I was like, I could bring this to any kind of gig. I
Right.
mean, I could go do a gig and not feel like I had my comfort, like my security blanket of a Telly or a Strat with me. Not that it sounded like either of them. It didn't have to sound exactly like a Strat or Telly. It was just I could I could play this without feeling like if I played even if I played a Les Paul, I'd feel like I need another guitar for a couple songs because it's not my comfort zone,
Right.
sonically. And but it was right around then that they wanted a change of scene, I think, for the demos. They didn't have a place in the factory. It would just be filmed like in a cubicle somewhere. Like it was low budget. Like that, people didn't realize yet how much the YouTube demo thing was going to be. Okay, this is what people are going to see with the guitar,
Right.
and
It's like the most important thing in a product launch now.
especially because if you don't put one out, somebody is going to get one and put it out, and it could be awful.
Right.
You know what I mean? It could just be like a distorted iPhone mic, making it or out of tune playing. But if that's what everybody hears for the first time, it's like that's what they associate with that guitar. But they came here and filmed one in the basement. Was the first one I did, and I had done a bunch of like on my acoustic gigs. I do a lot of looping, and I have like two pickups in my acoustic, and one kind of goes through a pseudo electric kind of rig, so I can kind of do. Not, I'm not trying to get great electric sounds out of it, but I can get
Right.
weird kind of multi-layered kind of sounds. And their idea was like, can you do something like that, but with the P22 when it came out? It was when they first put the,
Huh.
and so they basically, it was less about a demo. It was like, come and talk about the guitar, but basically build a couple songs where you can get electric sounds, acoustic sounds. And so they came down and filmed it, and I guess it did well for them. And they just kind of were like, "Hey, do you want to come in and do this other one?" And in the beginning, it was like I did a video here and there, and of course, I mean, I never would in a million years think to charge them for it because they had already hooked me up with a bunch of stuff,
Right.
and then it turned into like, "Hey, like we've got these 5 new guitars, and we need videos for them." And I was, going in the factory to do them, and then it was like, "Hey, do you want to come to NAM?" And like, and I was like, "Yeah, sure." But and then at that point, it kind of took on a like, I mean, I never really sat down with them and was like, I mean, I'm not an employee of the company.
Right.
I'm still an artist with it,
Contractor.
but they, we kind of worked out like, okay, this is how it's going to work, and figure out a rate when you work, and what I tend to do is I'll like, um, I kind of I get like barter allowance. Like, I mean, I charge them a
Yeah.
certain amount, but so like every once in a while, if I really want something or need something, I kind of like work it into the invoice. So it's a
I
great
see
situation.
you have one of those salvage Velas back there.
Yeah, yeah. So that kind of
That's
stuff.
one I'm sorry I missed the boat on.
The beauty of that kind of stuff for this gig, for the way it works, is that I get my hands on a lot of stuff first because it's for the demo,
Right.
and that like the Silver Sky when it first came out, because I saw the Silver Sky coming up, and I was such a Strat guy that I was like,
I've played the prototype, a couple of the
yeah,
prototypes, and
I
the
love,
60s strats that were hanging in the room there that they were working from.
yeah, and I mean, like with the Vela, we did the demo for that, um, and it was like in March of whatever year it came out, because for a hot minute they were going down to South by Southwest and going
Oh, yeah.
in the convention center where they had like a mini NAM, but it wasn't
Yeah.
really, but and so they'd have me, I'd be the dancing monkey down there too, where I'd, you know, hey, somebody wants to hear this guitar or amp, or like, and I'd answer questions, but it was more of like, I, they were just trying something out, but that guitar was launched why like we were down there and the guitar was released to the public, and I had always kind of had my eye on the Velas, and I was like, man, I really want one of those. I was like, I don't need it. I really want one. And I played that one. I was like, oh, when they came out with a hollow body one, I was like, ooh, that's closer. And then the semi hollow and the satin, I was like, this is kind of like kind of it. I love it.
Yeah.
And um and Mark Quigley, I think it was like checking his phone. The guitar was launched, and it was like a 3 month order window to the dealers, and he's like within 30 minutes it was sold out, like all of them.
Right.
I was like, uh, so that one that we used for the demo video,
Where's that?
where is that? They're like, oh, I think it's still in, they still have it in the marketing department. I was like, can we earmark that one, please? I think I dinged it up during the demo. Like,
Yeah, it can't be sold.
no. So I have a couple that I used on demos where if I really fall in love with the guitar and it makes sense that I think I have 3 guitars that I used in the actual demos, and I was just kind of like,
Right.
and the Silver Sky, oh man, I had a good angle on this, but it was legit. It was true. The Silver Sky I knew was going to be back ordered for a long time. And even though I'm an inside guy in a way, that
Right.
doesn't put me at like, if
No.
I'm like, hey, I really want a Silver Sky and there's a back order of it,
You're
I'm
like,
just
it's back ordered.
yeah. And they had like so many of their artists were calling artist relations going like, hey, how can I get one of those? They're like, dude, it's going to be a minute. Just. And I was like, I'm going to be the guy that you send to Sweetwater and all these places, like, because that's the other thing they started doing. They started sending me around to do clinics in
Right.
stores, but also like product trainings at places. So I'm like, I'm going to be going and talking about this new guitar that nobody has on the shelves yet.
Gonna need to
And
be
nobody's,
familiar.
I was like, if I can get this one, I'll bring my personal guitar to every training I do. I'll pass it around the crowd. I don't care. So I was like, but think about it. Like, people are going to be dying to hear this guitar, and they're not going to be in the stores forever.
And the store owner is going to be much happier with
Yeah,
your guitar getting passed around than one of theirs hanging on the wall, which is a liability, right?
I can't tell you how many hands my Silver Sky passed through. The very first clinic I did with it, it was the first I had it. I had it for maybe like I had it since the video that we did, which was shot a couple months before it came out. So I couldn't take it anywhere. I had
Right.
it home, but I couldn't take it to a gig. And then as soon as it was leaked and the information was out there, I had a gig in DC, but I was doing like a local clinic, like a daytime clinic up in Baltimore at Ryan Fowler's place. And it was like, and I had just gotten this amp too. And I was bringing that to my gig. And he goes, Ryan called me. He's like, hey, any chance you might be bringing some, secret guitar that, was just basically leaked, but everybody knows about it now?
Right.
I was like, yeah, I can bring it. Yeah. And he's like, any chance you can bring your amp too? I was like, sure. Yeah. Why not?
Why not?
So he posted on his Facebook thing, just like, hey, see, Brian's going to be doing a clinic here at 1 o'clock. And he didn't even say, he wasn't allowed to really say what it was, but he's like, but the news was, this was right after.
I remember, yeah, because it got leaked. It got leaked early, and so the push the release up, right?
Right. But it was out and it was official, but like there was just so much hubbub about it. Like, right. So like he posted it on there saying that like, oh, Brian's going to have a pretty interesting guitar with him or whatever. And I think the clinic was supposed to start at 1. I was rolling in there like 12:50. I think or whatever it was. It was right around the store opening time. I come walking out of my car and there's 40 people standing outside. And
Right.
it's not a big store. And I'm getting accosted walking through. They're like, "Is that it?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah." So the clinic consisted of me. Instead of me doing a normal PRS clinic, I talked for a few minutes about a couple things. I was like, obviously, I know what you're all here to talk about here. I was like, I'm going to talk about and play this guitar for a couple minutes, and then you guys line up and just pass it along to the next person. Nobody spend more than 1 minute with it. Like, honor system here. Don't hog
Right.
it up. Um, you're gonna have like 1 minute of slow dancing in a burning room, like
Yeah,
50.
exactly.
But it's like, and and like and then I basically, and I'll be here to answer any. I'm going to be standing over there answering questions if you have it. And that was my whole clinic, and that place was and people were talking about they drove up from like Virginia and like it was crazy. Like I couldn't
Were
believe how much hype.
I'm trying to remember, were there not pictures of him playing that guitar?
Yeah,
Like he played it at a gig, right?
he played it in. So what happened was, he was in Maryland playing like the Verizon Center or whatever, they keep changing the name of it, but whatever, the huge place in DC.
Normodome.
Yeah. And I think Paul brought the current prototype in this, it was like 99% done, but they were really futzing with the pickups back and forth.
Yeah.
And he brought the latest incarnation. John played it at sound check and was like, dude, it is so close. So close. He's like, take this back. And he sent his number one, like the 64, like his, favorite one back to and he said, try to get closer to the sound of this middle pickup. Right. So, like, Paul took it back, made some tweaks based on John's guitar because John was like, this was a Thursday, and John's like, I don't play until Saturday in Boston. And so, and this is just my recollection of, like, I mean, I wasn't there hearing
Right.
it straight from but it was that, but I happened to be at the factory that day. I didn't see Paul, but like John's guitar was in Skitchy's room,
Yeah.
and
There's always something good in Skitchy's room.
yeah, but he was like, yeah, so they're basically working on the last bit, and I guess they got John's guitar and the prototype back to him in time for the Boston gig, and I was in Chicago. After that, I went by the factory, and then I had to leave for Chicago. And all I remember is I woke up and I looked at my phone, and it's like my phone is blown up because John played the guitar, and everybody's like, either what is this Strat looking guitar with a PRS headstock that John's playing? Um, and
Or
I,
people asking you, "Hey, what's going on here?"
well, either that or like, but even like people from PRS, because I was like, I sent Jim a note. I was like, did you know he was going to play this? Jim's like, nope. Like this was not planned. Like, oh,
Right.
um, but I think it just goes to show you that, like, he's brilliant at marketing. Like, I mean, he would casually leak stuff, and I'm sure it's calculated. I'm sure I mean, he knows what he's doing. I mean,
Right.
whatever
He
he
knows people
did,
are paying attention to what every fucking move.
he even kind of leaked the 594, which wasn't even really his model, but like Paul sent him one before it was a thing, and he would play it on social media, but like kind of hide it. And I think finally, like a week before it was out, he actually showed it. And Paul wasn't mad at all. Paul's like, yeah, and it became a huge seller. Like it's like
That guitar is also amazing.
they're great. Yeah, I mean, I have to say, like, I really think PRS is kind of in a going through a renaissance. I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, they've always made great stuff, but they're firing on all cylinders. I mean, in
Yeah.
both the high end stuff is just, it really is getting better. Like, I mean, if you play like the old stuff, it's great, but I love. It's not like going, oh, the golden era, like, oh, the vintage PRS stuff is. I mean, but it was all fine. But the new stuff to me is just like, every year, like you play me, you're like, I didn't really think he can improve on it, but
There it is.
that's part of his genius. But also what they're doing with the SE stuff is amazing. I can't believe, like, bang for the buck what they're doing So I mean, it's
I
cool.
I only have SE and S2s.
They're
I
great.
only owned one core guitar, and it was like an old McCarty with a Santana headstock, and it was
Charlotte
great.
best, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I have the Starla, which is amazing. I
Oh,
love it.
I, you and I are so it's like even though like I have one or two of the like kind of figured maple top ones, and I like them,
It
but
it
really,
never appealed to me until I saw the Starla, and then I have what is the old baritone, the
oh,
Moose
the Fusion
Shock.
X7. Oh, the Mooshock. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I have a Moose Shock,
yeah, yeah.
which he refinished for me actually,
Oh,
and
yeah, I saw that. Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
got P90s in it. It's great. I love that was my first PRS.
Yeah, I mean that. Like I love the pretty ones, but I'm also like I'm a little bit more like a meat and potatoes kind
Yeah.
of. Like, I like. So I mean, my Starla is like the that blue, like ice metallic or whatever they call frost blue metallic, which I didn't pick the color. That was just when I was like, hey, can I borrow one? That happened to be around, and I fell in love with it. But
I'm kind of hot for that Lettieri.
oh, it's great. Yeah,
I'm kind of hot for that right
I
now.
haven't really. I've played one at the factory briefly, but haven't even plugged it in yet. I'm wait. They should have one for me uh, any day to let me just kind of kick the tires on it. I don't always do that. It's not like I bring every guitar home before I do a demo, but a
Right.
couple of them I try to like. I'd love to just
Well,
have my
that one is different enough that
yeah, yeah,
you probably want to spend a couple days with it.
and then I'm afraid how much I'm gonna want one though. That's the only problem.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and all my hooks are full, but phew, I don't know.
Uh,
I need more.
all the hooks. You sound like a store owner. I just don't have enough hooks.
I'm a store owner that just hates to sell stuff, which
That's
is
right.
the worst store owner in the world.
Uh, what have you done to stay busy this year? I mean, I guess how many videos have you shot for PRS
Not
since?
only a couple. I mean, because yeah, my year with PRS has been pretty slow. I mean, which I expect because half only part of my stuff would be like sometimes they would need me for like before NAM, before any big
Right.
product launches. I'd be, they'd call me and they're like, "Hey, we need like 6 dates over the next 2 months to get you in here to film stuff." But then it might go 4 months where I'm not over there for anything. Um, but in a typical year, I would do a fair amount of like, trade show. There would always be NAM, and then you know
Regional shows.
and it would be busy certain times a year, but it was nice because it was always based around my schedule. They were like, so this place wants a clinic, like
Right.
what do you have in the April May range, and I could be like, and they'd always be like Tuesdays or Wednesdays, so I could um, but so I was actually on. I came home from Nam and I went out on the road. I was gone for 7 weeks or 8 weeks on a tour that we were in the middle of it when everything shut down.
Right.
And but we only lost I think the last 2 or 3 dates. So it didn't really get cut too short. And then I kind of came home to, I mean, I had so much travel booked between PRS and a bunch of other travel like gig stuff that all of a sudden, the rug was yanked out from under me, as it was everybody. But I really didn't panic because I knew, like at home, I could do Zoom lessons if I need.
Right.
Like I mean, I have outlets, but so with what I do down here, I track guitars for people. I do a little bit of producing where I'm like doing full, a full record, but that's rare because it takes so
You
much.
can track a full band down there.
Yeah, but it's usually I don't normally have four people down here. It's like
Right.
it's more singer songwriters or something where I'm like I'm adding the parts, or I'm bringing in a drummer, or having my one of my kids play or something, and I'm playing all the rest of the instruments. But it's not like it's not a commercial studio where I'm like, okay, I'm renting out time and having a band down here.
Right.
It's an overdub room that I, and as much as I love producing music, mixing, and all that stuff, it's time consuming, and especially I'm you know, so like, um, so as far as the session work goes, I've only accepted about 20 or 30% of the work that I get called for because I just don't have time typically for it. Or I'll go, yeah, I can do that for you. It's going to be 5 weeks before I can start. And most people are like, "Ooh," so
Right.
so some people that I work with are just, there's a guy who's a song, he perpetually writes songs. And I used to play, like, he would send me his tracks almost completely done, but I would add some guitars and a solo. Sometimes I'd read, and over the course of, I don't know, however many years I've been, he doesn't put them all out on records. He's one of those guys that'll record 25 songs and then put out a 10 or 11 song record, and some of the other ones get shelved. I don't know how many songs I played on for him over the years. So that stuff is just always in the queue, and they're always waiting on me. So I was like, okay, I can come down here and start chiseling away at the backlog of studio work, and hopefully that'll get me through a couple months. And in that time, I got bombarded with studio work because there's tons of people who were stuck at home,
Right.
and a handful of them still had some money and budgets and go like, hey, I just wrote a whole record because I've been stuck at home for the past 3 months. And so I was afraid the work was going to dry up. And I mean, it's been as busy as ever. So instead of gigs, I've just been down here. I've recorded a bunch of different records for people. Some I've done where I'm producing. Most of it is just me cutting tracks and sending them out. And then I've been doing the videos, like
Yeah.
which has really taken the most amount of time, and they pay nothing, but I love it,
They are very time. Yeah, they are a labor of love.
And that's really, honestly, I'd say that's been, I've had enough work to sustain. And then the rest has been like, I could never do this. I could never do these videos in a normal year. I could never
No.
lock myself down here for 10 hours at a time. Um, and it started, actually, the whole thing started maybe like 3 years ago. I did a song with my two boys as a present to my wife. It was this
Uh,
James Taylor, J.D. Souther tune called Her Town 2. And like, both of my boys are primarily drummers, but they both play other instruments. And so I had my youngest son, Julian, learn the bass part, or and Aiden played drums, and Julian and I sang it. And it was like, it was just fun, and I wasn't really going nuts like trying to like mimic it exactly, but I get kind of geeked out about it. I was like, ooh, there's a little string part in there, let me, and it was just kind of a one-off thing that we did. And then during the lockdown, so my oldest son Aiden uh, was graduated high school in 2020, so he had kind of a weird ending of his
I'll
school.
say.
But the school he went to this private school that part of the seniors finish like 2 or 3 weeks before everybody else, and you don't have final exams in your senior year there. You do a senior project, and it can be kind of almost anything. You have to submit it, and some people go work as an intern at a law office somewhere. They can I kind of do whatever. Like, you have to lay out a thing like, this is what I want to pursue. This is, and you have to kind of write about your experience. And Aiden was going to go record a song or two where he's playing all the instruments, but not here. He had
Right.
worked with me, and but the part I was going to hook him up with a friend of mine and kind of get him out of his comfort zone. Um, and at first he was going to write songs and he was going to record a whole EP. And I'm like, that's a lot. it seems like, you'll get into it and realize how you've bitten off a lot. So maybe just do a song. And when everything got shut down and it was like, oh, maybe they're not going to do the senior projects because most everybody's involved traveling of some sort. And then they were like, well, everybody can submit another idea. And I was like, Adam, why don't we still do it, but do it here? And why don't you record a cover tune and let's pick something challenging and you play everything, but I'm going to teach you like as we go, like what we're doing. And like he was a great drummer, but he used to just sit down here and go like, okay, like I'd count him in and we'd start, but like I would get the drums set up and mic'd and tuned. And I was like, let's do this together. Let me show you what I'm doing. Like
Right.
explain some of the, and we did, well, I mean, I helped with the mix and all that stuff, but I mean, as far as performing it, he plays everything.
Well,
Uh,
he picked a tough song.
yeah, Alaska By.
Yeah, Jeff Buckley.
And like, I, of course, got overboard and geeking out of like trying to in the mix because I realized that it's like I've mixed a bunch of things, but I would never consider myself like a mix engineer. I mean, I did it here and there, but I was a guitar player that loved, and I could never get drum sounds that I liked down here, and I just always assumed it was my room. It's the size of the room, and and I think I had an epiphany this year in doing so much recording down here that I realized it's not I can get drum sounds down here. It's not ideal, but
Right.
you work with what you have. And I learned so much about tracking drums and mixing that I want to go back and now redo every song I've ever recorded in my entire life. But uh, that started it, and then after that, it was kind of like all these local things doing fundraisers
Right.
because they couldn't do live stuff. They were like, "Hey, can you do some kind of video performance of a song and we're going to use it for this thing?" And so it was like it just became me and my boys like, okay, let's pick something for so we weren't picking songs out of just thin air. It was always for something.
Right.
And
Well, I
we
mean, that
never
was the most that you had done with them. That was the most
recorded.
concentrated amount of time and the most intimate amount of time, like the most intimate time that the three of you have spent making music together this last year, you'd say?
Well, no, just in that capacity. Because
Right.
the thing is, I mean, I think a lot of people assume in a house like this where everybody plays and you've got a studio, we're all just sitting around jamming all the time.
Right.
Which, even though I would love that, it's not the case.
Right.
Uh, and I've used both of the boys. Aiden has played on a lot of records for me. So I've had him in the studio where it started off with one artist that I was working with that I would bring in different session drummers. And at one point, he was like, he had seen Aiden play, and he's like, "Hey, would you think he would want to play in a song?" And I was like, "I'm sure he would." I never in a million years would have tried to like force my kid on a session,
Right.
but be like, have them go like, "Oh, great," And he killed it. And like after that, he ended up playing on all like this
That's
a
awesome.
bunch of these songs
How
for.
gratifying is that for you?
Oh, it's great. It's great. And I mean, there are definitely things that it's like it's helped him a lot because as great as he was, you're like certain things you don't pay attention to when you're playing live. You're like, okay, like it was great for me because I could kind of help coach him, and I mean, he was still super young to do it, so
Right.
it's experience, and but at um, but he's both of the boys have done a lot of gigs with me, like if I'm home and doing like a solo acoustic gig, um, they had a toy drum kit. They would always come in here and play. But
Right.
in the beginning, Aiden got a toy drum kit when he was little. I used to make a hodgepodge kit out of the toy kick drum and
Yeah.
some little small snare. And I'd be set up like at a outdoor acoustic gig, and I'd have like when they were like 12 years old, one of them would come out and just feet to the fire. It's like they would sit in and play a song or two, but I'm like, you're gonna play songs that you've never heard before, but I'm gonna just cue you in and be like, okay, here's the basic groove. Just watch me on the stops, and your background music at a
Right.
bar gig, an afternoon happy hour bar gig.
If
You
you
do
miss a
whatever.
change,
Nobody's
doesn't matter.
right. And after with each of them around the same age, I kind of pulled them each into a gig like that, and it changed everything because it was like they were always a little like I would say, I mean, you never really get in your comfort zone by playing one or two songs live. You never really get to detach enough to like get into the moment because you're just thinking about it too much because the sound on the stage is new. It's like the first, it's like if you have a good sound check and then you play, you get used to it. But in the beginning, like it takes a while to warm up. And that was the first time I think either of them ever had played outside of their basement. And
Right.
they got to the point where they can be like, okay, I'm I'm in a zone now. Like and you could kind of hear it like halfway through the first set, you were like, okay, here we are, right? This is it. And after that, like it became pretty regular, right? And actually Aiden has been the fill-in drummer, almost permanent fill-in drummer for the Jarflys gig with Jimmy Davies.
Oh wow.
So our drummer lives in North Carolina now, but he was on the road all the time, like all the time. With he was Vinnie Colaiuta's tech, so he was out with like Sting, and
Yeah.
if Sting calls, you have to go, not because Jarflies are playing in Annapolis. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
you go, you know.
Oh really?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. We don't pay that much, but no, but no, I mean, so we used sub drummers on that gig a lot, and it there was one time we were playing some multi-band benefit show and Jimmy and I were going to do a duo and our bassist happened to be there and he's like hey we should find a drummer to like and we could do like one we're only doing two songs, let's find somebody to play. And he's like, do you think Aiden knows this song? And I was like, yeah, he'd be fine. And after that Jimmy turns around and he goes, next time we need a drummer, you're on. And that was he was probably like 16 or 17 at the time.
Right.
And he's getting calls from my like bands that I know. They're like, "Hey, would Aiden be like into?" So like, I mean, it's he's getting it on his own merit. I keep telling him, I was like, "Look, you have knowing me means that you'll meet people, but nobody's gonna hire you just because
Right.
they know your dad. Like,
Right.
you gotta be good to get called back. Like, that's all on you." And and my younger son is just sits upstairs and does nothing but write music 24 hours a day, and
Wow.
it's on his laptop and writes, and he comes downstairs and he's like, dad, I wrote the song. And it's like, and like he's got 20 vocal tracks and he's like singing into his phone. We have a studio down here. I'm like, come
Right.
on down, like we can record. No, and it's like, no, he'll come down and just go in the ISO booth because he likes to like be alone and quiet. He likes the way it sounds in there, but he's still singing into his phone and to like GarageBand.
Right.
And he goes, I was like, he has this. But
Well,
he's
it's I mean, there's something about using a device that is so quick and immediate.
I do.
And
I
when
mean,
you don't spend a bunch of time like tweaking and dialing in sounds and you just like it's a little bit more immediate and spontaneous, right?
and he'll spend 6 hours editing and mixing stuff. Like he's
Right.
geeks out over it as much as I do. But it's like when the idea comes to him, he wants to be able to track it. Like I got it. He has a mic and a little interface up there, and sometimes he plugs it in. But he's again, I'm not trying to change his. I mean, he's got his workflow. He knows what's working for him, and
Right.
but he wants to make movies, and I mean, they're both involved heavily in music, and they each do their own thing, and it's not because I like. I mean, I you can't make them want that. Like either
Right.
they do or they don't. And but yeah, I've there's always been a lot of music. We've played a lot of music together. Uh
That's awesome.
doing like the videos have been a different thing. I'm actually working on a video right now that's coming out next week for another fundraiser thing where I'm playing everything. I'm playing drums too, which is the
Oh
first
wow.
time I have in forever.
Well,
Uh,
we can talk about our song because this podcast is going
yeah.
to come out the same day.
Oh, sweet. Yeah.
Uh and it's funny because we started talking about this I got all excited because I converted my bass to fretless, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, I was talking to you about it, and you're like, oh, man, I just redid my double neck sitar guitar. And we were, and it was just like, it was all in at that moment. I was like, all right, I'm going to put a band together. And it took a minute.
Yeah, and actually it worked out fine because it came at a good time. Like if you had come to me a month or two earlier and said, "Hey, I'm ready for you," um, I was still getting the guitar put back together.
Right.
It took me longer to get the guitar
Well,
together.
it took that long just to get all the people.
Well, when you first brought it up, I was like, the guitar was still in its original state, but I'd been planning on doing this, and I was like, okay, while I'm in the lockdown, I've got a couple little guitar projects that I want to knock out, and that's been a big one for a long time. But it's a guitar that I can. I mean, I don't like. I might only pick it up once a year, maybe twice a year. You know, it's like it. So it's not like. But then I was like, you know, when it's gonna be apart is when I get the call where like, hey, I need that electric 12 string. I need that sitar. And as soon as you brought it up, I'm going, there's my deadline. Okay, let's get this thing done. I want to have it done in time for the video. So I was like, I took it apart. I got it about 75% there. And then I ran into a couple hiccups, as always. And then I'm going like, please, Mike, don't call ready for the track. Because I'm like, guitar. I was like,
Well,
remember that guitar I said I have? Well, it's not.
you absolutely nailed it. The
Oh,
whole song came out great. Um, but you know, it it really started to feel like it was coming together when I got your tracks back, and I was like, oh yes.
that was a fun one.
I knew I could count on you, but when I got your tracks, I was just like, it just sort of exceeded my expectations even.
Well, I appreciate that.
So yeah, thank you for that. And
Yeah, I'm happy to do it, and I look forward to you know having everybody check it out and see it
I
how
look
much.
forward I look forward to seeing a stage again someday.
I was kind of thinking of. I was thinking maybe I should dress up as like John Candy in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Yeah.
Because that whenever I hear that song, like I that's the movie that comes to mind. That ending scene.
Tell me about the benefit that you're working on for next week.
Oh, so it's there's a local charity called AMFM,
Uh,
and it's kind of like a emergency insurance security fund for artists and musicians in this area, in my area, in Annapolis, and it kind of started. They would have shows at the Rams Head on stage in Annapolis. Started off like they do two Christmas shows on a Monday, Tuesday in December, and they would sell out and make all this money. So they put the money into a fund, and if you lost a gig or something, or if there was a catastrophic thing, they could help out. But even if you just lost a gig, they could you could submit, and they would and they've been great. Honestly, it's like me and so many of my friends. I had a friend who makes his living playing music. He's a great bass player, but he also does solo acoustic gigs. I mean, he's full time gigs all the time. He's got a kid, and like he was loading gear into his car, and like something happened, and like his finger like tore a tendon, and
oh, geez.
where I was on his fretting hand, and basically couldn't gig for like 2 months. Like, and working musician, it's like you don't have
Right.
and so they've bailed so many people out of situations like that. So their main source of income is live shows, and so they've been doing a lot of these videos that I did with my kids. They've been doing these kind of a couple times a year. They did like a spring and a summer. They did like songs of summer, and then they did
Yeah.
songs of fall, and that's when we did Ramble On, you know,
Nice.
a nice fall song. Plus you have Lord of the Rings references, so that's always good.
You can never go wrong with that.
And so they're doing one. They're doing one they call like they're doing a March one, so it's like Irish. So any songs with any kind of Irish. They leave it pretty open to your own interpretation.
Right.
And so and I feel like I've overtaxed my kids with like we're doing a bunch of projects, and Aiden, my older son, is away at college now. He's not far. He's a 40-minute drive, but he coming home is not high on his priority list, and when he does, it's like in and out to do laundry or something. So like I feel like I've been bugging them about like, hey, remember we were going to do this and this and this, and even though they like doing it, like at a certain point, I don't want the music to become like a hassle. So
Right.
I had like 5 things come in at once that were like for different projects uh, that would have included them. One of them I just had to like turn down. I mean, they're not income generating, so it's like you have to take what you can handle. And one of them I was like, as much as I'd love to do it, we're gonna have to maybe take a rain check. And we're working on another one that is almost done. And then when this one came in, I was just like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do one completely by myself, so I don't have to bug the kids. And really, mainly, I would have them play drums probably, and maybe something else. And then I realized how much easier it is to mix and record when I have a solid drummer and not me. So it's taken a lot longer. Like I'm like, oh crap! Like I should have just said, Julian, come down here. We could have gotten done in an hour. What's taken me about 8. So
Right. Lesson
now,
learned, Dad.
yeah, now that I'm into it, I mean, I'm happy with it. It's fun. I'm also there's a lot of piano in
As
it.
long as you're living under my roof, you'll be session drumming.
Well, the other
Everyone's
problem
got to
is
have a chore.
it has to like it's a video, and
Right.
whenever I do videos, it's a video of the performance. It's not mimed. It's not.
Right.
So the thing is, if I wasn't doing this for a video, I mean, I would have played the drum track a few times through and just edited the living bejesus out of it and made
Right.
it, you know, a guy who doesn't really play drums as much.
Sound like a studio drummer.
But you'd be able to tell in the video if I did that. So, I mean, there's definitely. I'm not saying it's a front to back performance on the drum track on this one.
Gotcha.
There are a couple cuts,
Yeah.
but yeah, putting it to a video has made it interesting. But I mean, I don't have any dreams of becoming a great drummer anymore. I used to want to be able to play like all the instruments and be able to like go in and now I enjoy playing drums here and there. But when both of my kids were better drummers than I was by the time each of them reached the age of like 10. And that's when I knew I was like, okay,
Right.
time for me to hang up the sticks. You've been playing for 9 months and you're a little pipsqueak. And
Eat a slice of humble pie, Dad.
I was like, yeah. I was like, I'm going to stick to stringed instruments.
What about original music down there?
Yeah, yeah, I do. I mean, so Starbelly, the band I was telling you about before, we put out a record in 2018. It's called Four.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably one of my favorite. I mean, I've played on lots of records of my own and other people's. I would say, as a whole, that's probably what I'm most proud of. And I still, to this day, can listen to it front to back and not want to change something about it, which is rare. Almost everything else, I could go like, man, if I could go back now.
Right.
I really love that, and it's out everywhere. You can find it on Spotify and whatever. We've put out a couple songs since that record, a couple singles. We put out one a few months ago called "The Ballad of Baltimore," and then we put out a song called Song 26" in the earlier part of the shutdown, which has one of my favorite people, Roger Manning from the band Jellyfish,
Oh yeah.
plays some keys on there and sings some backup, and that was just purely geeking out over because we're such fans and was able to make that work. So it's like, why not? You know what I mean?
That's awesome.
So all that stuff is around, and we're working on some new stuff now. So we'll have a follow up soon. Jarflys haven't really done much. Jimmy is doing a lot of stuff with the Chicken Shack, but we threaten all the time about doing new stuff. I want to put out a solo record. I mean, I've said that for a long time, but I think Yeah, I think it's. But the part of the reason I've never done it is I don't know exactly what it would be stylistically, or because as much as a lot of people know me as a guitar player, like Starbelly is guitar driven, but it's not like it's very Beatley, Crowded House, Squeeze, XTC, Jellyfish. Like
What
it's
you need to do is you need to make a party rock album, like a la Fair Warning.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I,
That's
I would love to make a lot of, but the problem is like every time I think of doing anything, I go, yeah, but I mean, I don't like listening to records that are so disjointed that it sounds like. I mean, I don't mind genre spanning at all, but like even like my own bands, I don't want one band to be everything I love in one. You know what I mean? It's
then
like
you're gonna hate my solo album.
it's like having well, I mean, people have done it and people have done it well, but like for me, like I kind of feel like I like so many different things and I like having different outlets. I like and the problem is once you put your name on it, and that's kind of what people go, oh, this is what you do. This is your.
Right.
So I think if I put out a solo record, it probably wouldn't be my name. It would probably be I'd make up a band. I'd make up some kind of project name. So if 2 years later I'm totally embarrassed about what I was thinking at that time, I can be like, oh yeah, well that's
Or you don't it's like becoming a method actor or like a typecast,
yeah.
player or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've overthought it for too long. I think um, I kind of want to put out a guitar-ish kind of record, but not a typical guitar record, and not necessarily instrumental, but definitely like listening to Starbelly. There's a lot of guitar on it, but it's a different side of what I do. It's the song-based side, and I like that. But I also like Jarflys is when we play live. There's a lot of stretching. There's a lot of guitar in that band, and that's what I kind of love the two different sides. And some people hear Starbelly and go like, "Where's all the guitar?" And so, but I kind of feel like maybe putting out a guitar centric record, but not. I mean, it's not going to be a blues rock record. I don't know what it would be. I mean, I have nothing against blues rock, but it's like
Sure.
what I play in the PRS demos is just what comes out of my hands when I'm noodling.
Right.
But that's not really like you know that's not me composing my heart and soul.
Right.
I'm so bad at just the whole like I like playing in bands. I like playing songs. I like
Yeah.
hand me a guitar and put a camera in front of me and make me noodle. I'm like, oh god, what the hell do I play now? Like, what do I? You know what I mean? Like,
But it doesn't come across like that. I don't think anyone who's
right,
ever
right.
watched one would think that either.
Well, the new ones I've been making backing tracks at home and
Yeah.
playing to those, and it's so much better for me. Like, I feel like I don't have like
We have
the
some
early
like
ones.
a backdrop, a context to work to.
Yeah, like I mean, play like put a bass player in the room, put a drummer in the room, and just start playing a beat, and then all of a sudden the seed is there, and then you play to it. But the
Right.
idea of like, I mean, there's guys who do it so incredibly well, who you can just sit there and do a demo and just like put a guitar in their hands, and they just
Greg Koch,
oh god, yeah.
that
Well,
fucking guy.
and I envy that. Like it's like I don't no amount of practicing will ever like get me to the eye like because it's a different personality. Um, I just I mean I honestly I just love playing music with other people. Like there's just something about like that conversation that to me is what it's all about. Like uh,
What's the vibe in Maryland as far as coronavirus and stages opening up again?
um I mean there have been there's a couple places that are doing shows. Like
Like outdoor stuff?
there's some well there was some outdoor stuff. It's kind of it's starting to get warm again here, but like um there are a couple places like a few of the places where I do some solo acoustic gigs really didn't completely stop. If they were closed to the public for that short bit, obviously they stopped. But as long as they were open to the public, a lot of the places were trying any way they could to like include music,
Oh,
um,
that's great.
but and I turned a lot of those down because it was like not worth. They also were trying to, they had to cut the pay a little bit too because they don't have, and part of it
You
they were
didn't have as much coming in.
right. They were trying to help out the musicians, but they were
Mm.
also, and
They
I
also have to stay in business.
right, but it's like a lot of those calls. It was kind of like, we weren't the most uptight about it, my family, but we were pretty careful. Where a lot of people were like we were pretty much staying home, and we knew some people who were like being a little bit more lax about it. But the way I looked at it is it just wasn't worth the risk to
Yeah,
bring it home to my family for the little bit of for what it was. But I also had the benefit of being able to work at home.
right.
So I didn't need the work, and I knew a ton of people who like all they had was gigs. Like that was their livelihood. So almost all the calls that I got, I would just pass them
Defer.
along because it just um, it wasn't and it wasn't enticing to me. It's like I know everybody's like, God, I miss playing live music, and I totally do too. I do too. But like I've had 30 years of gigging and gigging and gigging, and I love it, and I definitely miss it. But man, taking a break from it is almost kind of like,
Well, imagine, well, I mean, you already explained that you made some leaps in your ability to mix
well, yeah. I mean, I'm
and
still making music. It's just,
and
yeah.
video editing has
Yeah,
taken a big
I
like you've learned a lot about video editing.
I have, but I have to say, my video editing started. I was an iMovie guy
Right.
years ago, and I not that I ever wanted to do it like in any sort of professional capacity, but the reason I learned iMovie, so when my kids were little, my wife works part time. Um, she'd be gone during the days. I was gigging almost every night, but I was home with them during the day. We'd wake up. I'd have the two boys and I. We'd hang out. We'd do whatever. She'd come home from work. We'd have dinner, and I'd leave. Go off to a local gig. So
Yeah.
like I could leave the house at 8:30 and roll in and be ready for a 10 o'clock set. Um, so trying to find ways to entertain two young boys and a dad at home. I mean, it's true for any parent. Um, you know, we do the normal kid stuff. We have a playground outside, but it was a really crazy hot day, like insanely hot, like 105 degrees out or something. And the boys wanted to play. They were bored. They were little, and I was like, let's make a video, a movie. And at first, I was going to recreate the Beastie Boys Sabotage video with them,
That's ambitious.
but they were young enough that it was like, I, you know,
They
I
didn't
don't
look
know.
good
Like,
in the
I was like, well,
sunglasses
I got to
and
listen to the words again because they pay attention to that stuff. But they were, and so then I decided, my kids have always been like kind of interested in stuff that goes well beyond their age and generation. Like they love all kinds of, you know, my music and the music, like their well is deep as far as like pop uh,
yeah.
culture references and all this stuff. And neither of them had ever seen the show Miami Vice. But my son Aiden who maybe at the time was like 7, maybe was obsessed with Miami Vice soundtrack because he got into synths.
Right.
And like I was showing him synth music, and he heard that the Jan Hammer stuff, and was like, he he knew that entire, like, the not just the one with like "We Belong to the City" and "In the Air Tonight," but the instrumental score soundtrack. So we did a Miami Vice esque like 5 minute video, no talking. It was on YouTube. It got pulled because I used "Whole Lot of Love" in it, but I think it might be. I think it's on Facebook still, but I called it Arnold Vice. We live in Arnold, Maryland.
Right.
and it basically stars Aiden and Julian. They each play good guys and bad guys. So like as they cost, so they're both the cops and they're the bad guys, and everybody else is like they've got Elmo, and Elmo. Spoiler alert: Elmo dies a pretty sad death. Um,
Whose idea was that?
oh, we worked on it together. It was,
Yeah.
I'll find a link. I'll send it to you.
Someone had to perish.
It's so that was so much fun. Like it was basically a day in our life. And then like I spent like I was learning how to edit an iMovie. And then after that we made a music video to a Phoenix song that they loved. And they were down here. Neither of them really were played much of instruments. They just dabbled, but they're all just, you
Yeah.
know, and I'm learning how to make like, overlay, I was just trying to,
Yeah.
so that was the start of my video editing. Arnold Weiss. It's a
Yeah.
cult classic here in our
It's
household.
amazing.
And but so I've dabbled with that a bit. But I definitely the Final Cut has made life a lot easier.
Yeah.
iMovie was pretty limited in, with trying to do multiple screens and stuff. But
Yeah.
um, I like when I see like even like what Andrew does at PRS, the guy who does all the video stuff. Like people give me credit. They're like, "Oh man, your demo videos are beautiful." I was like, "I don't make the guitars." Like people would go like, "PRS, man, your guitars are amazing." Like I don't have anything to do with designing them or building them. The videos, I don't have anything to do with the video editing or production or the audio, other than me walking in and turning the amp on and playing and talking. Like it's all somebody else, and they deserve the credit. But Andrew does such a beautiful job,
Yeah.
um, and I mean he's got four cameras rolling all the time, and like it boggles my mind at sometimes that like I couldn't imagine. I would be so stressed out filming. Like I couldn't imagine being a wedding videographer, like some
Oh,
special day, and like I would fuck something up. I'd be like,
like,
"Oh,
like
what happened to this
drop
SD card?"
drop the hard drive or
Yeah,
the card into the punch bowl.
I missed your vowels. Is that a big
What a
part?
big deal.
Can you guys redo those? Um, yeah, no, I enjoy doing it, but as you know, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of
It's
work.
it's a lot of time in the saddle.
And
As
forget about
Michael
color
said.
grading and like all that. I don't get into all that stuff. As
No, I don't either.
long as it looks okay, just leave it.
Look, I'm colorblind. That's something that I never told Jim when he before he hired me at PRS. I am colorblind. I
Well,
can't tell green and red and purple half the time. Uh, yeah.
yeah. So why
So
do you need to spend money on a fancy looking guitar? Just like,
that's right. Well, that's part of it.
yeah, oh, I get that.
Yeah.
I did not know that about you.
Yeah, it's true. Don't feel bad for me though. I'm good at other things.
It's probably helped your ear.
I don't know. I hear it's good for I hear that humans developed color blindness because it helps in your ability to hunt.
Really?
It helps. It's like a camouflage buster, like animals
Oh,
who have chameleon like, you know,
I wouldn't be able to see it, but you might notice it.
I read that somewhere.
I,
Probably my phone heard me talking about being colorblind, and it was like, let's send this asshole a story that appeals to him with some ads in it
yeah, yeah.
for walk-in bathtubs.
Well, I mean, if you read it on the internet, I'd say it's probably true.
Oh yeah,
I mean, I've learned everything I know from the internet. I was an idiot before the internet. I didn't even know what a Dumble was when I was gigging with one.
right? Huh?
It took the internet to let me know how cool that amp was.
Right?
I had no idea. I had my Digitech processor.
That's
Like,
right.
I'm just kidding. I
Did you
did.
have the 2101?
No, I think whatever I had was like a 128 or something, or I
Yeah.
don't remember. I bought something at Atomic Music and had it for a little while just because it made some neat sounds, and It was.
Look, in no way does Atomic Music sponsor this show, but I just want to say again how I think maybe I was coming to Maryland and I might have even asked you. I don't remember how I found it first. I don't know if I was just like, I wonder if there's any cool shops, or if you were like, oh, there's a place, it's a little ways out of the way, but try it out. There's some good stuff. But you walk in there, it's giant. It looks like it used to be a grocery store.
Well, they've moved. They've had, I don't know how many locations since. I mean, it started. It used to be in a tiny or a house right in College Park, Maryland, by the university,
Right.
and it was just like an older, like 1920s style house where you walk in and you walk in and there's a dining room to the right and a family room to the left, and then basically each room just had stuff in it. Like it was like it wasn't gutted and turned into a store. It just felt like somebody's house that had just a bunch of gear in different rooms. And
Right.
they moved like up the road and across the street to a bigger location, and so they've moved a handful of times. But this last place is, yeah, they keep getting bigger and bigger, and
It's huge. And
it's
it's just like
so much
just
stuff.
guitars leaned up
Oh, yeah,
against everything. Amps
firewood.
stacked up. Yeah, like amps stacked five high in rows. Like it's like a Indiana Jones, it's like the Raiders of the Lost Ark, that last scene where they're just like, ho hum, we're just gonna put this ark back here amongst the other things. And when you walk through there, you find
Oh
some
yeah.
cool ass shit, and they're always ready to wheel and
Oh,
deal.
if you pick up one thing that's $300, they'll be like, "Just give me 275 for it." And you're like, "Cool." And then if you pick up something else, they'll add them together and subtract more. They'll just give me this. You're like it's like
Yeah.
the more stuff you do, and I so the two main guys who own it, Lewis and Eric, like I've worked with both of them a bunch, and they're both like no nonsense. You walk in and it's
Yeah.
like and they're busy, so they're like, "What do you need?" Like, "Let me help you." And they're always like helping bunch of, so you're like, "Hey, I just want to see what you'll give me. I want to trade this in. What will you give me on trade?" And they're like, "Cool." And then they get off in their account, and he comes back 10 minutes later. "Oh, I'm sorry, wait, hold on. Well, I was checking on something for you." But my back in the day, back in the '90s, when I was finding all this stuff, I was in my old original band called Nonfiction that I was with in the '90s, and I was at the height of my goal was like I wanted every esoteric piece of gear I could get my hands on. Like I dreamed of having a Mellotron, and
Right.
I wanted the real stuff. Like I was starting to amass like a collection of vintage keyboards, not crazy ones, but just like whatever I could find. And then I realized what a headache they were, and like but like I would just go in there and look for stuff, and I bought my first drum kit there. Um, a friend of mine lent me a crappy little drum kit when he was out of the country for a year on this sabbatical teaching English after college, and he had this little junky drum kit. He just dropped off at my house, and I was like, "Hey, this thing's fun." When he came home and I returned it, I was like, "I'm gonna go get a drum kit." So I go to Atomic and I'm looking around and just trying to find anything and consulting my drummer friends, like, "What should I get?" And I had this Volkswagen Cabriolet, like an '86
Yeah.
convertible Rabbit kind of thing, and I just gotten it because I had an older one. I had a 1980 Rabbit convertible that was rusted out, like I mean, I bought it cheap, and it was drivable, but like it wouldn't pass Maryland inspection. And my friend who had just come home from overseas, his car wasn't working. So instead of selling my '80 Rabbit, I bought the new one and I was ready to sell the other one. And I probably could maybe get 300, $400 for it, you know. But I let my friend just drive it for a while he was getting his car situated. So I pull into Atomic, I buy this drum kit, and I'm walking out to the car, and Lewis is helping me, and the owner, and I have to put the top down because the kick drum won't fit in the
Right.
door. And he's like, "Oh man, these little cars are fun, man. These are cool. I always, And I was like, "I've got another one. I'll trade you some stuff for it." And he's like, "Oh, I don't need a car." I was like, "No." And so I walked in and I looked around the wall and I picked a Rickenbacker 12 string, and we worked out a deal, like we traded even up. I
Wow.
I had a gig like 4 days later, 5 days later in College Park. Like, I
Uh,
mean, it's a 45-minute drive for me, but I was like, I'm playing down the road. So my friend drove me to the gig, or drove separately, but I drove the old car. I dropped it off. I took the Rickenbacker 12 string, went to my gig, and my friend drove me home. I'm at the gig with this, and everybody, like, my band knew that I didn't have the kind of money to go buy this guitar. Like,
right.
when I get that, I was like, remember my old white car? I just traded for it. They're like, you traded a car for a guitar? It's like, actually, I think I made out in this deal. And later, I sold that guitar. You know, I sold it because it just hung on the wall.
Yeah.
I didn't have this set up, but I was like, I'm not playing it enough. And at the time, the value of that guitar was like, I was broke, and I was like, man, it's silly for me to have this. It's great, but I think I played some Dan Electro 12 string. And I'm like, you know what? This sounds fine to me. And so I found the double neck that I have now at Atomic
That's great.
for like $250. I bought it one, and I sold that guitar for probably, I don't know, $1,500. It was the early days of eBay.
Right.
So man, I've I've
That's
traded a lot of stuff
great.
now that I think about it. But
Hey,
I
Ryan,
Harford, yeah, I know it's getting late.
I've been doing the pee-pee dance for about 25 minutes.
Well, why don't you go
I'm
ahead and
like,
do that?
you see me over here, I'm fidgeting. It's because uh I've been doing the waters thing.
Yeah, actually I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go eat a little dinner myself.
Nice.
Yeah,
Dude, I had a great time talking with you.
that was a lot of fun.
I really appreciate you taking so much time tonight.
Yeah, man.
And again, I don't want to hand job you too hard, have you going cruising around thinking that you're the king of the cock of the
Absolutely not.
roost,
Yeah.
but totally crushed it. Totally crushed it. The video is as good as I can make a video, but the song is incredible by no, but certainly no fault of mine. It's you and everyone else on the track are incredible. So thank you.
Well, you did all the heavy lifting with that bass part. That bass part is no joke.
Oh God, don't get me started because
Yeah.
I will. I'll let go of my bladder.
Well, I appreciate you having me on this and on the song. It was a lot of fun, and I'm sure we'll do some more. I'll send you some stuff to. I'll send you a
Amazing.
copy of Arnold Weiss if I can
Oh
find
yeah, I'd love to watch that. Well, again, thank you. You're the champ.
Hey, good seeing you, man.
Have a great night.
See ya.
Bye.